Hello and a warm welcome to our session on unlearning. This is an introduction to the session, and I'm looking forward to the conference and to discussing this issue in person with you, and also hearing the wonderful 5 contributions that are part of this session. My colleague and other chair of the session, Maria Fernanda Gebara, unfortunately could not join us today. But I'm excited to announce that with her and a number of other colleagues, we are working on a special issue on this very topic: unlearning, relearning, undoing, Eurocentric modernity, and hegemonic scientific truths for a more just futures. So I invite those of you who work on those topics to follow up, and hopefully details on the special issue will be known by the time of the conference. So today my aim is to cover 3 things. First, I'm going to provide a background on unlearning as a theory, like in theory, very briefly though. Next, I will articulate our approach to the concept and the motivation for the same. And then we will ponder on what specific knowledges require unlearning and how. Okay, this didn't move the slide here. So some background about learning and unlearning and why thinking about it in the context of the work we do is important. In theory, the learning and unlearning is a cognitive process rooted in psychology and is discussed a lot in the field of medicine, neurology, and obviously cognition and education. So from this understanding, knowledge is a capacity to act. In psychology, knowledge is defined as a capacity to act at the individual or collective level. And how we think and act is affected by what we have learned, what we know, what our experiences are. So if what we know influences what we do, so our action and behavior, and who we are, who we see ourselves to be, then unlearning or letting go of some of our knowledges can lead to change in action and allow for different versions of the self to be imagined and eventually embodied. Right. So in the literature, mostly unlearning is framed in a positivist science perspective with instrumental and utilitarian understanding. And this is especially true in the field of organizational management, where it has been approached as a tool for individual and organizational improvements and innovations. So unlearning is seen as rather a political act of intentionally letting go of obsolete science and developing in place better knowledge and better innovations and so on. Then there is this emerging body of research that focused on unlearning in the context of sustainability and transformations, where our dominant scientific knowledge, Eurocentric knowledge, and ontology and epistemology is problematized as a barrier for sustainability transformations. So this rationale is that so the rationale here is that we need to identify and challenge such knowledges, and therefore unlearning is seen as a process and a requirement for transformative change. So I sympathize a lot with this later approach and position my intervention in the field, in the literature, within this same domain. But the difference, or I'm kind of specifically interested in unpacking the motivation for why we want to change, why is this important? Because there are many different rationales. In particular, the idea is to direct the motivation about unlearning as a means to address the injustices and oppression rooted in Eurocentric scientific traditions, and related assumptions, myths or half-truths that they reproduce and legitimize. So the reason I think that this aspect deserves particular attention in this discussion of unlearning and transformation is that the problem of injustice and oppression and violence of science is not likely to be addressed unless that is the key issue that is being challenged. Okay, so therefore, my motivation for unlearning is just and less oppressive science and knowledge. Such science and knowledge do not come only with trans and interdisciplinarity and even with pluralist epistemologies, all of which are important. It requires identifying, problematizing, and directly rejecting the hegemonic, the dominant scientific truths in a variety of disciplines, from archaeology and history, economics, international policy and development, studies, philosophy, biology, and many others. So obviously, this is not something that I'll have a response to all those disciplines, but the importance is here to challenge them. Which those disciplines and knowledges have been used since the time and memorial, since the Columbus's discovery project, and especially since the Enlightenment, to justify various hierarchies and dominations, which continue to be the origin of the racist, capitalist, colonialist, sexist, and extractivist model of development. Yeah. So the starting point is thinking about unlearning in the context of tackling oppression, which is embodied within our very science, our knowledge systems. Oppression nested in our best of intentions. So unlearning become an act of care and solidarity, for care and solidarity. It's a collective healing process. Once you approach it in that way, it is becomes about reducing epistemic violence and oppression and oppressive ideologies and the politics which they trigger and legitimize. And another important point is that because of the Western understanding of what knowledge is delegitimized and misrepresented. Unlearning because the Western understanding of what knowledge is delegitimizes, misrepresents, and makes invisible other ways of knowing and other knowledges. Okay, so please. Right. So in terms of unlearning kind of what in more concrete terms, there are plenty of conditioning and things we are taking for granted, and we are not even aware of them being problematic or unjust. Things like individualism, capitalism, superiority of scientific over other forms of knowledge, superiority of science over spirituality, human exceptionalism, so the superiority of human over other living beings and forms of life. There's half-truths or myths, harmful truths, untruths. They are rooted in the Western philosophy, ontology, and epistemology. So from Aristotle to Descartes to Malthus, they're thinking, certainly with various modifications and adaptations, but are still in use and application made in service of the colonial capitalist nexus. With the ways and conditioning that such prescribes. The ways and conditioning of the way we live, we relate, we die. It's about unlearning, then about more specifically what These are some, on the slide you find those, like I basically said most of them: competition over cooperation, capital over planet. They're all related. In summary, really, it's about unlearning the colonial and capitalist identities and assumptions, which we identify with, we internalize. They become our norms, our beliefs, our values. So it's also a lot about unlearning of the self in relation to those trends and processes. So I had some technical issues. This approach requires individual and collective desires for change, which is growing. Well, when we accept that our actions and behavior are driven by our knowledge and that such need reinvention to serve solidarity and justice, we can consciously work to reject harmful and reimagine, co-create, open the space for careful knowledge that support collective healing and solidarity with human and other than human. But of course, this first requires awakening or realizing and admitting that the scale and the extent of violence and injustices that are related and inherent in the European modernity and the Western ontology, which in turn hopefully triggers a desire for action and change that can be manifested and acted upon externally or internally. Externally, I mean protesting the system and the structures of oppression, doing really outside of yourself work, but also internally. And I would argue that this inner change through self-study, self-reflection is a precondition for collective and external action and change. The effects of inner change on transformations remain unexplored, so work is needed to merge the inner and the outer, the internal and external. The next slide is about how this happens, what we as researchers, for instance, can do. These are just some examples, but of course, this is what I would like to discuss with you. So I'll also, because of some issues in my recording, I think I will go with the next slide, which is the last slide, and which is about the call for the special issue and what kind of contributions we welcome and we think about. Okay, now it continued without interruption. Good. So in this call for our session, and hopefully soon in the special issue, we call for theoretical, methodological, empirical contributions regarding the three things listed there. What are the dominant mindsets and ontological logics that require unlearning and undoing? The multiple processes of doing that, and methodological implications for epistemic and ontological justice. Also, contributions that deal with how to unlearn the modernity and its accompanying colonial, capitalist, extractivist practices that do not allow for nor acknowledge the existence of other ways of knowing and being, relating to nature, land, place. Right, and thank you for your attention, and looking forward to seeing you. Bye.